faithfully delivering value by interpreting great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally with Sally's Book Talk. Today, we're interpreting the book called The Coddling of the American Mind for you, with the subtitle How Steel Was Not Forged. The book was co-authored by two writers. Greg Lukianoff, one of them, is a Stanford Law School grad and heads the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, fighting to protect free speech and academic freedom on U.S. campuses. In his work, he noticed that before 2013, American college students were often strong defenders of free speech. But after 2013, many students started pushing to limit free speech, often demanding sensitive content be removed from textbooks or canceling talks that made them uncomfortable, threatening protests otherwise. Meanwhile, more students are dealing with anxiety and depression on campus, and suicide rates keep rising yearly. The authors call this the coddling of the American mind. To protect students' fragile sensibilities, professors have to avoid sensitive topics, making campus voices less diverse and free discussion rare. So Greg teamed up with Jonathan Haidt to co-author this book, aiming to find causes and solutions. Jonathan is a social psychology PhD from the University of Pennsylvania and a famous psychologist. Sally's Book Talk has covered his book, The Happiness Hypothesis. I love this book, and now, after publication, this book resonated widely and was named one of the New York Times 100 Notable Books for 2018. The book has 4 parts, covering 3 main sections of content. Parts 1 and 2 form the first section, where the authors analyze the causes of the coddling of the American mind. And 12, they believe this is mainly due to 3 widespread false beliefs in current U.S. society. In part 2, the authors dig deeper into why these false beliefs arose. Part 3 proposes some targeted solutions. Our discussion today will cover these 3 sections too. First, let's cover part 1. The coddling of American college students after 2013 was influenced by 3 cognitive distortions. The first fallacy is the fragility fallacy. This fallacy claims that any harm only makes people more fragile. In the latter half of the 20th century, as safety awareness spread, dangerous products and behaviors became increasingly rare. For example, from 1978 to 1985, all 50 U.S. states passed laws requiring car, child seats, and daycare safety facilities. Designs also prioritized child safety. Sharp objects were removed, significantly reducing child mortality. This was good, but safety awareness gradually became extreme safetyism. People started believing that safety isn't absolute unless it's absolutely safe. Thus, even minuscule potential dangers must be eliminated. Take children with peanut allergies. Though only 0.04% of children under 8 have this allergy, since the 1990s, U.S. parents and schools banned all peanut contact. Peanut butter sandwiches, cookies, anything containing peanuts got banned, with schools constantly expanding prohibited lists. Even products from peanut handling factories got banned. But this overprotection backfired. Without exposure, kids couldn't build immunity, increasing allergies. As safetyism expanded unchecked, it permeated parenting and education systems. Children lost opportunities, playing in mud, fishing, solo exploration, all sacrificed to eliminate remote risks. Truth is, true safety comes not from coddling, but from learning to navigate threats. The graver issue, safetyism has quietly infiltrated society over 50 years, from physical safety to the realm of emotional safety. For example, before the 21st century, psychiatric diagnoses had strict criteria for trauma, not based on subjective judgment. For instance, trauma from war or torture could qualify for PTSD, but not divorce or loss of loved ones, because even though these are deeply painful, people usually recover without intervention. However, in the 21st century, trauma assessment became subjective, with more people casually claiming trauma for any perceived hurt. Another example, Columbia University has a core course called Western Literature and Philosophy Classics. And in this course, professors assign readings from famous writers and philosophers like Homer, Dante, Augustine, Montaigne, etc. These works often reflect the values of their times, such as male centrism, white centrism, Western centrism, etc. In 2015, four Columbia undergrads co-wrote an article in the campus paper, arguing that Western classics often feature themes of exclusion and oppression, offending readers and making them feel marginalized. And so they suggested that before reading these classics, professors should provide trigger warnings. However, this warning mechanism might actually foster psychological barriers by anticipating discomfort. Because, like the immune system, both individuals and groups need challenges to learn, adapt, and grow stronger. This leads to the coddling of the mind. The second fallacy is emotional reasoning, which means always trusting your feelings. Feelings or emotions are real, but often unreliable when they surge. People often distort facts, follow their feelings, and make poor decisions. For example, in the earlier case, some students felt offended by a passage in a book. Then, they assumed all writers from that author's group had ill intentions and labeled themselves as victims. So,
In other words, they let their feelings, especially negative ones, lead them to infer harm and injustice, which can cause psychological issues.
for example, people with depression often get stuck in a vicious cycle. Negative thoughts lead to negative emotions, which then drive them to find negative evidence to support those thoughts, trapping them in a loop. And in fact, when an author writes a certain passage, they might not be condoning injustice. They could just be exposing a social issue for critique or sparking constructive discussions. Therefore, what truly disturbs people isn't the event itself, but how they interpret its meaning.
People need to distinguish between intentional and unintentional offenses, not just define actions based on emotions.
Students in U.S. colleges come from all over the globe, with different ethnicities, skin colors, and customs. If you insist on feeling offended, it's everywhere. So the school's attitude is crucial. So, should schools emphasize reporting every perceived offense, or teach students tolerance for unintentional slights and understanding others' intentions in a diverse society? Clearly, the second approach is more appropriate. Reporting systems essentially cultivate feelings of victimhood, anger, and hopelessness among students, turning universities into hostile environments.
However, education's essence isn't about comfort. It's about teaching students how to think.
The third fallacy is dualism. This fallacy sees life as a battle between good people and bad people. So, what does us versus them mean? Let's look at another case. Olivia, a student at McKenna College in the U.S., is a second-generation immigrant from Mexico. Once, she emailed the entire school community. In the email, she noted that there are very few Latino staff in administrative and teaching positions. But many Latinos work in support roles, and she felt she was only admitted because the school must recruit a certain quota of Latino students. And therefore, she felt marginalized and deeply distressed. 2 days later, the provost, Spellman, replied saying, "Would you be willing to find some time to discuss these issues with me? They're very important, both to me personally and to the academic affairs staff. We're always striving to better serve students, especially those who don't fit the McKenna College model." Actually, this letter was meant to show concern for Olivia and offer support. But Olivia believed the word model had hurt him. He interpreted it in the least charitable way, that he didn't fit the school's model and didn't belong at McKenna. 2 weeks later, Olivia reposted the full letter on social media with his own comment, "I could never meet McKenna's so-called distinguished model." This ignited a firestorm, quickly leading to campus protests demanding the provost be punished and publicly apologize to prove no ill intent.
Students weren't appeased, shouting over his tearful attempts to speak. Even his choked back tears were misinterpreted as sleeping.
The school didn't fire the provost, but didn't publicly support either side. Later, as student fury escalated and national news coverage fueled the flames, the provost was forced to resign. This incident actually used identity politics, people's sense of belonging in socio-political life. Identity politics takes many forms. Martin Luther King Jr. practiced inclusive identity politics, envisioning equal rights for blacks and whites, emphasizing shared humanity rather than blaming whites as enemies. For example, in his famous I Have a Dream speech, he repeatedly called both blacks and whites God's children, meaning, while applying political pressure, he saw opponents as fellow humans appealing to shared humanity. Conversely, there's adversarial identity politics that unites groups against a common enemy. In the earlier example, Olivia saw himself as oppressed and marginalized. His social media mobilization framed the school administration as enemies, like traditional white male rulers. This mindset creates a polarized axis in students' minds, one end representing privilege, the bad guys, the other, oppression, the axis itself. So, life is a battle between good and evil people. Thus, they see more actions and words as attacks on themselves, judging events solely by their own feelings while ignoring others' intentions. But this mindset also breeds a culture of denunciation, where students publicly expose anyone they deem to have made a mistake, big or small, acting like heroes against oppression, directly shaming or punishing so-called offenders instead of gently advising and offering suggestions. Among the onlookers, many might sympathize with the unintentional offender, but don't dare to stand up and defend this person, because the whole atmosphere is one of either-or adversarial thinking.
If you sympathize with the offender, then you're also condoning hate speech, forcing everyone to pick sides.
If you're not with us, you're against us, creating an illusion that everyone agrees with the judgment without dissent. All right, that wraps up the content of Part 1. After 2013, the widespread coddling of the mind among American college students was caused by 3 cognitive fallacies. First, the fragility fallacy, which avoids any potential harm and shows an overprotective tendency. Second, always trusting one's feelings, letting emotions dominate reasoning, becoming increasingly extreme. Third, either-or dualism, viewing life as a battle between good and evil people. So, what are the real-world reasons behind these 3 cognitive fallacies? This is the second part of today's discussion. The authors believe the reasons are multifaceted, primarily summarized as 4 points. First is the political reason. Escalating hostility between American political parties, especially after the Trump administration took office, becoming more evident. On one hand, Trump offended and even insulted members of marginalized groups, like Hispanic immigrants. On the other hand, he encouraged his followers to spread hate speech. From the statistical data of the independent polling organization Pew Research Center, it's clear that the U.S. political landscape has changed significantly. Americans' feelings toward their own party haven't changed much since the 1970s, but their attitudes toward the opposing party have grown increasingly indifferent or hostile. And with the right and more powerful consequences, they can. Ratings of the opposing party by Republicans and Democrats plummeted rapidly between 2008 and 2012, with partisan rivalry becoming so heated that it's reached a point where, if you support it, I oppose it. Republicans and Democrats both strive to completely distinguish themselves from each other. Demographically, Republicans are becoming older, whiter, more rural, more male, and more Christian, while Democrats are increasingly younger, non-white, urban, female, and non-religious. Social media also fuels this polarization. The content people search and browse is algorithmically designed to feed you exactly what you like. As for information you disagree with, you can set it to never appear. The result is that both conservatives and liberals fall into isolated moral matrices, cut off from the outside world. They're exposed to entirely opposing information worlds. Nowadays, many Americans harbor deep-seated hostility toward those with different political views, even eager to hold up signs saying, "Tell me bad things about the other side. I'll believe anything." This confrontational mood hits people's excitement points. Media websites, talk shows, and conspiracy theorists seize on this, fanning flames to create division, using outrage to gain attention, boost clicks, and profit. Second, the development of the internet has also made people more psychologically fragile. Since 2011, the mental health of American teens has generally deteriorated, with anxiety and depression spreading nationwide. University counseling centers are overwhelmed. Studies show a positive correlation between screen time and depression risk. Exceeding 2 hours daily significantly increases the risk. This is because, while social media makes interaction easier, allowing you to connect with people worldwide without leaving home, virtual interaction isn't the same as face-to-face communication. It can't fully satisfy human needs for belonging and connection. On social media, interaction often only involves sight and hearing, whereas face-to-face adds touch, smell, and more. Long-term reduction or removal of key sensory inputs, like touch and smell, may destabilize the entire nervous system, greatly increasing depression risk. Moreover, kids in the internet age spend increasingly long hours in front of computers. The book quotes Sean Parker, Facebook's first president. He said that when developing Facebook, the main question was how to maximize consumption of people's time and attention by giving occasional dopamine hits, like when someone likes your photo, comments on your post, and so on. Thus, kids in the internet era have less real-life experience than previous college students. They're less rebellious, more compliant, unprepared for adulthood, maturing later, and demanding more protection in college. Third, from the family perspective, parental overprotection also exacerbates the problem. Modern society has abundant information. Any dangerous incident anywhere quickly becomes widely known, making parents excessively anxious. They always believe their children are in danger. In fact, U.S. crime rates have significantly decreased in recent years. For example, the murder rate in 2003 dropped to levels from 60 years prior. These dangers are mostly imagined by parents. For instance, experts might advise against letting children use public restrooms alone. When kids are in the stall, parents should wait outside, constantly talking to them. But the real question is, should we teach kids to constantly talk to parents in restrooms, or teach them to recognize inappropriate behavior and handle risks? Overprotection robs them of learning to assess risks independently. In other words, overprotection itself is dangerous. It damages teens' mental health and resilience, while social pressures force parents into overprotecting. For example, police suggest kids shouldn't go out alone until 16, and some places make leaving under 13's home alone illegal. Thus, parents become helicopter parents, constantly hovering, teaching kids the world is full of danger and reinforcing us versus them thinking. In this environment, from kindergarten to high school, children's days are strictly scheduled and monitored. Self-learning, social exploration, and scientific discovery all yield to safety concerns, with outdoor playtime diminishing or disappearing. Finally, from the school's perspective, university corporatization and safety-first campus bureaucracy have worsened these issues. U.S. universities are increasingly corporatized, with profit becoming many schools' primary goal. Elite institutions are rapidly expanding in both scale and wealth. Statistics show that during 2015 to 2016, U.S. higher education institutions' total revenue reached $548 billion, nearly equivalent to a mid-sized country's GDP. Another consequence of university corporatization is students becoming consumers, and the consumer is always right. At some schools, annual tuition and living expenses alone cost $100,000. Therefore, what classes to take, what meals to eat, what dorms to live in, even which speakers to invite, the consumer naturally has the right to decide. When students protest, university leadership is often indecisive and permissive. Even when student behavior is wrong or violates codes, universities rarely discipline them because students are clients, whose lives require careful adult management. Facing potential dangers, overreaction seems safer than underreaction, making schools more professionalized and specialized, requiring more staff and new departments for emerging issues. Over time, campus regulations pile up, becoming increasingly bureaucratic. This management breeds distorted thinking, reinforces students' fragility persona, and strengthens safetyism.
Students believe danger is everywhere, so they report anything suspicious immediately.
Students report professors' classroom content, making faculty self-protective. Controversial topics vanish as campus bureaucracy handles conflicts.
Ultimately, this creates moral dependency in students, both on campus and in society.
They always rely on external authorities to solve problems. Since administrative help is readily available, they more easily see themselves as victims, overreacting to words. From these 4 points, we see government, society, families, and schools have all coddled children's minds at their levels, deepening psychological fragility. So, how can people reverse this situation? The book offers detailed suggestions for families, universities, the nation, and society. This is the third part of our discussion. Since families are children's first school, we'll start with family education. The authors provide 5 key suggestions. First, parents must learn to let go. Children need real-world experiences to become resilient, autonomous adults. Parents can monthly ask children what tasks or challenges they believe they can handle independently. Letting kids experience setbacks helps them learn and grow. For example, let children explore together to learn stranger risk assessment or play in nearby parks. The parents should provide guidance, ensure basic safety, teach mutual help, then allow free play, or encourage walking or biking to school when routes and safety permit. Additionally, while many parents prevent children's arguments or hide adult conflicts, parents should actually encourage meaningful debates to teach conflict resolution, not avoidance. Second suggestion, teach children basic cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, replacing distorted thoughts with accurate ones to manage emotions appropriately. For example, when a child feels like a failure after one poor exam result, parents should explain that one setback doesn't define them. Everyone fails sometimes. Remind them of past successes, emphasizing learning from mistakes to improve future performance. Third suggestion, help children establish boundaries between good and evil in their minds. For instance, teach generosity of interpretation. Focus on the best or most reasonable aspects of others' expressions, instead of focusing on the worst or most aggressive parts. This way, children won't be misled by the either-or fallacy. Fourth suggestion, limit and optimize children's screen time. For example, set clear 2-hour daily limits. Parents shouldn't be glued to devices either, setting bad examples. Fifth suggestion, have children work or serve before college. This gives them independence to explore interests and develop social skills away from parents, helping them mature before entering university. Next, universities also need transformation. The book offers 4 suggestions. First, protect free expression rights for students and faculty on campus. The authors suggest every U.S. university should officially declare protections for free speech. For example, the 2015 Chicago Statement drafted by constitutional scholar Jeffrey Stone explicitly states, even unpopular views shouldn't be suppressed, but tested through open debate. This statement has been adopted by over 40 universities, including Princeton, Columbia, and Johns Hopkins, and additionally ensure fair hearings for complaints about speech, understanding context and resolving conflicts, not immediate punishment. Second suggestion, reform-focused reform university admission standards. Universities should select students based on maturity and independence, not just test-taking skills developed since childhood. This could transform campus culture significantly. Some high schools are already shifting focus toward intellectual virtues. Universities should admit more students from such schools to reshape American education. Third suggestion, teach students constructive debate skills. The fundamental purpose of university is truth discovery. Veritas is truth, and appears in many elite university mottos, like Harvard's. Yale's motto is light and truth is established through debate. Restricting free speech and debate rights betrays the university's fundamental purpose. Therefore, students must first understand that having beliefs challenged is integral to college life, not harassment, but essential for correcting biases through intellectual exchange. Second, present viewpoints rationally with well-reasoned arguments. Personal attacks and biases during arguments are unacceptable. Critique the idea, not the person. The fourth suggestion, cultivate strong campus ethos and shared identity. Though intangible, this builds trust that solves complex problems. For example, Harvard's ethos is ever reforming, ever innovating, ever pursuing. This inspires Harvardians to be motivated and progressive, never arrogant. Finally, nationally and socially, the authors recommend creating environments conducive to youth development. And society should prioritize cooperative rational debate over us versus them, labeling and malicious competition. Reflect on internet algorithms to prevent information silos, emphasizing diverse voices and tolerance. That concludes the main content of The Coddling of the American Mind. This book truly addresses critical issues of our time. While discussing student development, it reveals interconnected societal problems in values, systems, and structures. For this fragile generation, teach them to navigate paths rather than paving roads for them. This requires collective societal reflection beyond just parents and educators. Though diagnosing U.S. education, it offers valuable insights for Chinese readers concerned about education. That concludes our interpretation. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.